Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening. Today, we'll be having a conversation with Wild Orca Science and Research Director, Deborah Giles, and environmental journalist, Lynda V, to discuss Lynda's new book, Orca, Shared Water, Shared Home. We will be discussing the state of the endangered killer whales, why we should have hope for their recovery, and the important ways that we all can make a meaningful difference and use our voice as engaged citizens. We have to cover a lot in a limited amount of time, and we have a mixed audience. So bear with us. We are going to touch on as much as we can, and we hope to take time to answer questions toward the end. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Lynda V and Dr. Deborah Giles.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hello. Thank you for being here today.
Delighted.
So, Lynda, could you begin by telling us how this book came to be, how you got started with the Southern resident orcas?
Well, for me, this story actually started in crisis. It started in the summer of 2018, and an orca whale who had just lost her calf, J35, also called Telequa, was continuing to carry that calf, even though that calf was dead. I mean, she refused to give it up. She clung to this calf. She wouldn't let it go. And I'm a reporter at the Seattle Times, and I get this press release from Ken Balcom at the Center for Whale Research explaining that while scientists are aware that very sophisticated, intelligent, socially connected animals such as elephants and orca whales do this grieving behavior, what was going on with her was very unusual, that she was clinging to this calf day after day. And in fact, that really touched my heart. And I just thought, I'm gonna stay with her. I'm gonna follow this as long as it takes. Wherever she goes, we at the Seattle Times, we're gonna stay with her, and that's what we did. And you know what? By the time she dropped that calf, and actually I don't think she dropped it. I think it just fell apart. She carried it for 17 days and more than 1,000 miles. And by the time I finished writing that story at the Seattle Times, there were more than 6 million people reading that story around the globe. And I think I know why, because she was a mother who happened to be a whale. And anyone who's ever lost anything could empathize with what she was going through. And it was at that time that I reached out to Giles, trying to understand what was happening. And she's worked with these whales for so long, and she knows them as individuals. And I'll never forget what Giles said to me. She said, "What is beyond grief? That's where she is."
Giles, now, could you please tell us, as Lynda says, you're in conservation biology and you know these individuals. Can you share some of your experience with them and some aha moments to really wow our listeners?
So I just wanted to say that I'm actually in Sacramento, along the American River is where I grew up. And it was a kind of a shocking moment not that long ago, maybe 15 years ago, when I realized that I grew up on a river that would have produced a huge amount of fish for these whales that I have been studying since 2005, that have been, fell in love with more than 30 years ago, that they actually come down here and rely very heavily on this fish. And Lynda, we were talking earlier about what you've learned about this area, and I would love for you to share that with the people that are viewing.
So, they're called the Southern residents for a reason. They're called the Southern residents because these orcas get their fish, and they are fish eaters. They don't eat marine mammals. They eat fish, predominantly Chinook salmon, because it's the biggest salmon in the sea. And they get those fish all the way from the Taku River in Alaska all the way down to the Central Valley of California. And people forget this. They forget that they're called the Southern residents because they go all the way to California for their fish. And here's the thing: the Sacramento River in the Central Valley of California used to be the #2 producer of Chinook salmon, behind only the Columbia, which was the biggest producer in the world. And today, because of all the changes on the Sacramento, including the Shasta Dam with no fish passage, the winter run Chinook that would have provisioned the Southern residents during the hungriest time of year, December, January, February, It's down to just a couple hundred fish in the worst years. And you can imagine what it's like for those fish right now during these terrible drought conditions in California and the terrible heat wave in California. Now, this is a fish that needs 52-degree water, and they've lost all their high mountain cold water redoubts up there off of Mount Shasta. No, they're confined to the baking hot Central Valley flora of California. And a lot of that water now is being diverted for people, for agriculture, for cities. And the cold water pool that they usually draw from to try to create some habitat for the winter Chinook below Shasta Dam, it used to be about 50 miles of cold water that those fish could encounter released from the depths of the Shasta Dam. Well, because there's been no rain for 2 years now, really, very little rain, the water level in the reservoir has greatly dropped. And furthermore, the sun is beating on what water is there. And there's also greater demand for water for people. And so the amount of cold water for fish is so tiny that they're down to 10 miles of usable habitat for these fish. They're at their peak spawning time right now. Furthermore, that water is going to continue to diminish and really very likely be completely gone as a cooling factor by mid-July. And those fish will just be coming out of the gravel then, those little baby fish that we need for the future run. And so we're really circling the drain. These fish, they're just like the whales, the southern residents, the salmon, they need what they need. They're like us. They need to eat, they need a place to live. And the winter run Chinook were a critical run for the southern residents. And right now, the only thing more endangered than the southern residents are these winter run Chinook, and they are unique in the world. They're the only summer spawning salmon. And so I was on the phone today with the biologist at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. I'm doing a story about this in the Seattle Times. It'll be out in a few days. That really looked at L25, the oldest of all the southern residents. Now, she was born in 1928. So that's before the Shasta Dam was built. It was before the Snake River dams were built. It was before the Columbia River dams were built. It was before this tremendous environmental change. And she is still out there. She was seen just 2 weeks ago at the west end of the Strait of Juan de Fuca in Washington State. She's still out there trying to feed her family. And so she's going down to a place like Central Valley, California, where this winter run is now so greatly diminished. And why is she doing that? Because she was taught to do it by her mother, and she was taught to do it by her grandmother. And I often think if we could understand the matriarch, L25, the oldest of all the southern residents by 40 years, by the way, if we could understand her language, I think she says the same thing we hear from other elders, which is, I used to come here with my grandmother and there were so many fish. What happened?
So how do we make sure that that doesn't happen to the Columbia? How do we protect these rivers? How do we get our salmon back in California?
Well, this is the thing. This is why I like to talk about California, because to me, it's a wake-up call for us here in Washington State. We can get a little smug and think, oh, well, that would never happen to us. We'd never let that happen to us. Well, it could actually in 50 years. We have to take deliberate steps to make space for these whales and these salmon, basically let them win. There's no question we could take all of what they need. We're on our way now. We have to do what probably very few societies other than the original societies have ever done, which is step back and make space for these animals with whom we share this place we call home. It isn't ours. They were here first, and they have a right to be here. And the orcas are the top predator. The Chinook salmon are the biggest salmon in the sea, and they feed 123 different species of vertebrate wildlife. They feed the soil, they feed the streams with the nutrition they bring back from the sea. These are absolutely critical species, not only to the southern residents, but to a whole suite of life, and frankly to us. I mean, the Northwest would not be the Northwest without the southern resident killer whales that still swing by, even to downtown Seattle. I mean, downtown orcas, who's got that? We don't ever want to lose these animals.
You did say that in your book, you mentioned that these marine mammals are in one of the most urban environments. And you also mentioned that they want to add a new freighter shipping lane to Vancouver, right at the mouth of the Fraser where these orcas feed.
Yeah. That's right. No, that's right. It never stops. And you're very right to bring that up. It's a transboundary issue. We can't solve this only in Puget Sound or only in the Columbia or only in the Snake or only in California or only in BC. It is going to take all of us as a bioregion. I mean, look, these fish travel all over this region, as do the orcas. And so we cannot say, oh, well, the fall run Chinook and the Columbia are doing great, so it's fine. That's not enough. These whales need to eat everywhere they forage. They need to eat every day of the year. They're not fasting adapted like us to be in good form to reproduce. And Giles will talk about this. They need to be nutritionally supported, just like us. And especially this gets to pregnancy and reproduction.
Giles, you do conservation biology. You're collecting scat from these southern residents, and you are learning their stress levels. You are learning about their nutrition levels and the salmon and where that salmon is coming from. Can you please talk to us about that and your findings?
So first off, Lynda, gosh, thank you so much for setting the stage and really drawing the attention about these whales all the way down to California. We Washingtonians really like to claim these whales as Washington's whales, but they have traditionally, their traditional hunting grounds have been all the way down to Monterey, California, and all the way up to Southeast Alaska, but mainly to the, kind of Haida Gwaii Islands up north of Vancouver Island. And, this is like you mentioned, killer whales are like us, like we humans, where they have to eat every day to maintain optimal health. They're not like humpback whales or gray whales that have long periods. They've evolved to have long periods of famine or of fasting, I guess we could say. Killer whales are not like that. And so what we end up finding from the scat samples is that when the females are not getting enough to eat, they are spontaneously miscarrying their growing fetuses. And when they're not, when they are able to bring those females are not getting enough to eat, when they do manage to bring their calves to full term and birth them, often these calves are dying right away before they can be documented by a scientist. And that is exactly the case with J35 and her daughter that died right away. And so when we think about, there's just so many different, I guess, levels to be thinking about this. It's the physiological toll that it takes on these animals and the emotional toll that it takes on these animals. And so, really with all of the threats throughout their entire range, if we were to distill the biggest threat down, it would be about salmon. And that alone is a humongous story. It's a humongous issue that has so many different parts to it. How do we even start to scratch the surface of that? But I think the first thing that we need to do is recognize that these whales, like Lynda said, have been here in this region, in the Pacific Northwest, all the way down to California, through the millennia, since time out of mind, or as time immemorial, since time immemorial, as other people say. But just that, like, we cannot conceive of how long they've been co-evolving with the salmon that also evolved within the ecosystems of the Pacific. And that's both absolutely disturbing and frightening and scary, but it is one of those things that gives me hope, because we know what the problems are. We actually do know what the problems are. The science is in. We have the science. We just now need to create the political will, find the political will to make that happen. And
I'm vigorously nodding my head at your point there, Giles, because I don't want people to think, oh, this is too hard, it's hopeless, give up. Not at all. I mean, what we need to do is what we already doing, which is a lot more of what we're doing. I mean, look at our enormous success with habitat restoration. Everywhere we've done this, it works, and no one should be surprised by that. I mean, of course, if you create access for an animal like the salmon, which have radiated into every single suitable habitat since the Pleistocene, they're going to take advantage of it. So I like to say this is as simple as clean, cold water running downhill. You can count on it every time. You can count on nature. I mean, this is so much easier than so many other problems that we face. This isn't world peace. This isn't curing cancer. This is this is hydrology, and this is clean water, and this is taking out deadbeat dams, and this is taking out old infrastructure that isn't doing anything for anybody. I mean, look, dam removal has really changed as a problem-solving tool. It used to be regarded as kind of this radical hippie action, and these days it's like this boring utilitarian thing that communities all over the country are doing. And why is that? Because a lot of this infrastructure has aged out. It's not doing anything for anybody. Sometimes it's downright dangerous. In the case of the Elwha Dam and the Glines Canyon Dam on the Elwha River, the Elwha Dam was rated as dangerous by the Army Corps of Engineers. The Glines Canyon Dam, you couldn't get a license for it under modern environmental standards. Crown Zellerbach didn't want to pay to upgrade it. They got the deal of the century when the U.S. Congress in 1992 said, okay, fine, we'll pass the Elwha Fisheries Act. We'll take them both down, and we, the American taxpayers, will pay $325 million to restore the fishery. And, at that time, the opponent said, oh, can't do it, shouldn't do it. And if you did do it, it wouldn't work. Well, I'm happy to tell you that since dam removal was completed in 2014, there were 8,000 Chinook going back to the Elwha River last year, and there are probably going to be more this year. And the out-migrating class of little baby Chinook was, the biggest we've ever seen. Furthermore, these animals that were locked up above the Glines Canyon Dam that were rainbow trout, genetically unique for 100 years, they're now re-expressing their anatomy to go to sea as steelhead. So you have this fantastic two-way migration of recolonization of adults coming into the river mouth and these silvery cascades of steelhead going out to sea. I mean, it's spectacular. The summer steelhead in the Elwha River, this was regarded as this is a total Lazarus story. These fish were regarded as goners, that they were just absolutely extinct. And they're back. They're back in bigger numbers than any river on the Olympic Peninsula. And it's incredible to me. And it's even bigger than that because the dippers, which is that fantastic aquatic songbird that you see going up and down on the banks of the river, they're so big, so fat, so sassy on these fabulous coho eggs that they're eating now, and all these great little marine-derived nutrient-stoked bugs that they're eating from the salmon carcasses, that the female dippers are bearing double clutches of young. They're bigger in body size. They don't even migrate anymore. It's like, why? Why would I leave? There are more eagles. There are more eulachon. There's more everything. And this all happened in less than a decade. Not only that, the whole near shore has reset to its Washington's newest beach. There's a crab fishery again. So, and that's just one place. And you look at a dam like the Enlow Dam on the Similkameen River in central Washington, sitting up there, hasn't made a kilowatt since 1952. I talked to the commissioners at Okanagan PUD. They said, oh, I used to say I'd sell it for a nickel. Now I'd sell it for a penny. But God, they're still trying to rebuild their PUD after the terrible wildfires. They're busily putting up telephone poles. They don't have the money to take down a dam. They need to do what American Rivers did with the Tulalip tribe, with the city of Bellingham, and take out the dam in a partnership on the Nooksack River. And they got it done. And that dam is down, and you've got Chinook going back into the high mountain waters of the Nooksack River for the first time in a century. And that was done in a partnership with the state legislature, a tribe, an NGO, a city. This is the kind of thing we're going to see more and more of. And what we need is a dedicated fund to pay for these kinds of actions. Because as long as salmon and orca have to throw down against the University of Washington and K-12 education and all these other essential tasks of government, they will never win. We have to have enough money to do these actions that we know work. And we need to do them in Puget Sound, we need to do them in central Washington, and we need to do them in eastern Washington, so that these animals can do what they know how to do. And you can count on them, they will.
So you're telling us if we remove these deadbeat dams, if we take action, then the river will rewild itself. The salmon will return. Birds will return.
Yeah.
The environment's going to thrive. It works.
Sure. We've seen it, and we'll see it again. And we've seen it everywhere that this has been done. And so people should feel confident. In fact, they should feel empowered. And they should reach out to the legislators that they elect, and to the U.S. senators, and to the governor that they elect, and to their elected representatives in Congress, and say, we care about salmon, we care about orca, we vote, and we want you to to take care of this. We want you to put money in the budget for these things. We support this. We want it to happen. We're Northwesterners, and to us, Northwest means trees, fish, and orcas, and it means rivers. And this is the thing. We are in a place now because of changes in energy markets, because of all kinds of technological advances, that we have more choices than we used to. And the things that are rare now are wild salmon and orcas.
Which are the things that define us in the Pacific Northwest.
Exactly. I want to ask Giles to talk a little bit about some of the unique attributes of orcas. You know, for people who are perhaps new to orcas or just maybe don't even know some of these delicious facts. I mean, if you could talk a little bit about their culture and their language and their lifestyle. I mean, you observe them all the time when you're out in the field doing your work, and maybe you could just reflect a little bit about what you see when you're with them and what you know about their culture and intelligence.
You know, these are animals that are culturally bonded. They're socially bonded for life. They cooperatively hunt and share food. Even when they're starving as individuals, they will still find and split a fish so that their family member can forage with them, eat with them. It's like the ultimate breaking bread with your family. That's what we see with the Southern residents when there's food out there. And shockingly, even when there's not a lot of food out there, one of the most endearing photos that I remember seeing ever was actually taken from a drone by Dr. John Durbin and Dr. Holly Firmbach. And it was of J2, our oldest known female, who is somewhere between her kind of late 80s and early 100s, based on genetics and photographs. So an incredibly old individual. And she was documented in the latter part of 2016, actively foraging and herding a fish towards her great grandson. And that's because his mom, J14, had died that year as well. And this is an animal, you know, again, great grandmother. She was starving herself, and yet she was trying to make sure that he had enough food. And those are the sorts of things. And, you know, of course, the greeting ceremonies that we used to get to see, we don't see those anymore. A greeting ceremony is when you have this, you know, say one pod, usually it was J pod, that would still be in the inland waters or have come in. And then several weeks or, you know, a month later, another pod would come in, K or L pod would come in, and they would beeline it towards each other. And I mean, racing where boats couldn't even hardly keep up with them, and they would race towards each other and then stop 100 meters or maybe a little bit more from each other and just hover like peck to peck, lined up with J-Pod, all the J-Pod members lined up, facing off with Ks or Ls, and they would just hover there at the surface and hang there with no sound, no audio that we could pick up with hydrophones. And then suddenly some sort of social, cue would happen. And then it would just become this massive whale ball of whales rolling on each other and, older females going off and hanging out with each other and the young males going off together, and young females that were just getting to that age of breeding would go off and hang out and group around the pregnant females. And we don't see that anymore. We don't get to see that because there's just literally not enough food in the inland waters. The so-called designated summer core critical habitat for these whales, there's not enough food in the Salish Sea to bring different groups together. But those are the sorts of things that I hope that that's happening on the outer coast someplace, that they're getting together in these family celebrations, these family traditions. And, it's something that really, you cannot help but be moved by it. You cannot help but be moved by these social interactions, like with J35 carrying her baby around. I mean, there was just not a person on the planet that saw that was not, if not moved initially, at least, quizzical, like what on earth is going on there? She literally stopped people in our tracks to ask what is happening. And these are the things that really, they are individuals. They are unique personalities, and they are part of an intricate fabric that has created what we know as this culture known as the Southern resident killer whales. And with every single loss of an individual, it's especially critical of individuals like breeding age females and breeding age males. It's unraveling that fabric. And that's the hard part, is that we know what's causing, we know who's back there or what issue is back there pulling at that thread. And it's the lack of quality and quantity salmon. And so it all goes back to that recognition of them as individuals and as a culture that really, to me, lends itself to us looking to them as our guides. They are better versions of us. That's how
Dr. Giles and Lynda, the southern resident killer whales are federally protected. They're an endangered species. Now, doesn't NOAA have a legal obligation to protect them and safeguard their habitat?
Yes. Yes. Full stop. Yes, absolutely. And it's so funny, I'm a reporter, right? So people say to me, "Oh, you're an advocate for the whales and the salmon." I say, "Well, as a matter of fact, it's the law, I mean, they're supposed to survive. So if you're writing about the problems, what you're writing about is the fact that we're supposed to be living up to the law, which is why some of these lawsuits have been so long running. I mean, in the Columbia snake, there's been a lawsuit in the courts, federal courts, since the early 1990s when I first came to Washington State. Funny story about that. I was working for the Spokesman Review as baby reporter, just got here. And this gigantic decision comes down from Judge Malcolm Marsh out of federal court in Oregon. And he says, we need a complete overhaul of the Columbia River. We're running it by, for our convenience and the least disruption to the, established interest on the river. And that's got to change, complete overhaul. And I'm thinking, whoa, something big is going to happen now. What a lightning bolt. And I write this story, I'm sure it's going to be this total game changer. Here we are in the year 2021, and I'm still writing about federal biological opinions. Is it the fifth time, the sixth time? I've totally lost track, Giles. And it's the same fight over the same fish in the same place. And it's like, I don't even believe it. And now the new lightning bolt is this Republican out of Idaho named Mike Simpson, who comes along and says, take them all down, take down the 4 lower Snake River dams, get a goo gob of money from the federal infrastructure bill, which I gather now maybe has a chance, and just replace the benefits of the dams for the irrigators, buy power to replace lost power, re-rack the ports in Pasco, basically rebuild so that the fish can survive, so the orcas can survive, and as a matter of fact, reposition people for a better future. And this has gone off like a bomb in the region. Here comes this Republican out of nowhere with this massive proposal. And it's very interesting because the tribes, the initial reaction from Governor Jay Inslee, from the U.S. Senators, Patty Murray Cantwell, was very cool. They didn't jump on board. They didn't knock it down, but they didn't get on board either. And so time goes by. Mike Simpson still isn't getting a dance partner. And finally, they came out with a statement saying dam removal is still on the table, but not this proposal. And the tribes all over the region, the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians, so we're talking Western Montana to Northern California to Puget Sound to interior Columbia Basin, all the way up to Southeast Alaska, like 57 tribes, said, actually, we want this. We want something, and we want it now. And not only that, but we don't want a quarter spent defending this biological opinion in federal court from the Trump administration. And furthermore, we're going to have an Orca salmon summit at the Squaxin Island Casino in Jay Inslee's backyard on the 7th and 8th of July. And I'm like, wow, that wouldn't have happened. I don't even think 5 years ago. So what's going on? I think it's a whole range of things. I think it's the continual presence and power of the tribes claiming their treaty right to preserve their culture. It's an environmental justice issue of the absolute first rank. And actually, I mean, look outside. What's the weather supposed to be Saturday? 101? I don't even know anymore. It's 108 in Portland or something. And look, times are changing. Climate is pushing this issue in a way that it has never been pushed before. And, the Nez Perce tribe, just as one example, they're trying to catch salmon that are now so diminished in the interior Columbia Basin runs up there in the snake system. There aren't enough fish for even one salmon for every tribal member. And it's just unacceptable. They signed treaties not giving away, but ceding use the right legal word, millions of acres. And they didn't just give it away, quite the opposite. It was a bargain. And the bargain was, we will peaceably cede these acres, but in return for our way of life and protection for our way of life in perpetuity through the right, reserving our right to catch these fish in our usual and accustomed places everywhere we ever did. And that bargain is not being lived up to. And it is the highest law of the land. It's in the US Constitution. So you have all of these forces coming in play right now. Climate change, treaty rights, tribal governments insisting on finally seeing some action for orca and for salmon. These fish and these whales themselves pushed to the absolute edge. And as a matter of fact, business interests such as irrigators and others saying, look, we're sick of all this uncertainty. We would really like to see a solution. So it's a different time. I mean, I've covered this for a very long time, 20 years plus. And I can tell you, it's never been like this. Not for the whales, not for the salmon, not for the politicians, not for the tribes, not for all the rest of us. So it's going to be a very lively summer. It's a very good time to educate yourself, you know, read the book, read the Seattle Times, follow these beautiful published scientific papers put out by Deborah Giles and her principal investigator, Sam Wasser at the Center for Conservation Biology, and so many other scientists. Just like she said, you know, we know so much about what's going on with these whales. We actually know what to do about fish. So we should confront this not with a sense of doom, but hope and resolve, honestly. Just kind of get on with it, a work song for orcas and salmon, and make these young calves that are out there, these 5 new calves in the last 2 years, make them, you know, give them a world that they can survive in. You know, let these calves live.
Well, on that note, you know, I know a lot of people have heard about Space Force, but I doubt a lot of people have heard about the Orca Task Force by Governor Inslee. So what's going on there? Is that going to help save these southern residents?
Giles, you were on that.
Yeah, so I served on the prey work group and the vessel work group, and there have been some movement actions taken, most specifically regarding vessel regulations, new vessel laws. I think that there's woefully little done in the actually the most important of the 3 threats, which is the salmon. We as a community, we as a government, and including Canada, although they're, I would say, leagues beyond us with regard to what they're doing to recover salmon and limit fishing right now in order to leave more fish in the water for the whales. We're not doing enough. The way that fisheries are managed is too compartmentalized. Salmon are anadromous fish. They go from freshwater out their natal river, or a tribute, you know, the main stem of the river that their river is a tributary of. For example, Snake River is a tributary to the Columbia. Those fish want to exit the Columbia Basin and hit the Pacific and hang a left, basically, and go up to Alaska. These fish don't see borders. They don't know that now we're off the coast of BC, Canada, and now we're back in U.S. waters, and we're up in Alaska getting big, eating, you know, cold water nutrients, cold water produced nutrients. They just know that that's what their destiny tells them to do, is to go north and get big and then turn around and come back and spawn. We don't see it like that. We humans see it in very compartmentalized areas of management. And to me, truly, I think that the thing that we need to be doing as a species, a human species, is to be thinking about how to better manage our fisheries. We need to think very clearly and logically and scientifically about when and where and how we fish. So doing these fisheries on the outer coast of Washington and BC, Canada, and in Alaska, in what's called a mixed stock fishery, which is exactly what that sounds like. It's a mixed stock you end up getting. It ends up taking a tremendous amount of bycaught fish that the fisher folk are not actually targeting. These are fish that are caught at different stages, at too young of a stage of their life, or at times when we don't have a good handle on how many larger fish we're allowing to make it back to their natal river to spawn. And so for the bulk of the fish that are caught in Alaska are not Alaskan native. We need to understand that better. Only 3% of fish caught in Alaska are Alaskan native. And so that means that 97% of fish caught in Alaska are not native to Alaska. They come from BC, Canada, and Washington and Northern Oregon. And a large portion of those fish are from endangered or threatened runs. And so these are the sorts of things that we need to understand better. We humans, non-managers, not that managers aren't human, but the general public needs to understand better and understand how to engage in that dialogue, to be asking for the whales to have a place at the table. Right now, the whales are not considered a major stakeholder in fisheries management decisions. There was a recent Pacific Fisheries Management decision, I guess, that just the public comment just closed 2 days ago. They're setting standards that are not at the right level to protect the fish in the water for the whales. And I really think of the whales as the original harvesters of Pacific salmon. These whales co-evolved with salmon throughout the Pacific Northwest and California that would have been massive. These are, Snake River salmon would have been over 100 pounds. Salmon coming out of the Sacramento and the American River would have been massive, close to 100 pounds, maybe even higher. We don't see that now. The average Chinook in Washington state is 12.5 pounds. So for a killer whale that requires 350 to 450 pounds of food per day to maintain optimal health, that's a lot of foraging effort to go into finding that kind of food for themselves and for their family. And we humans are doing pretty much everything we can to limit those foraging opportunities for the whales. And again, it sounds dire. It's not dire. The fact that we know everything that I just spoke about, everything that Lynda has been speaking about, we know the facts about this. We have the science. Now we just need to figure out a way to discuss this with the politicians that we've elected. And to that end, I do want to say that in Washington state, our elected officials, especially Maria Cantwell, her staff has been incredibly responsive to our requests for meetings with them. In fact, when I was coming down here to California just 2 days ago, I was able to attend a meeting with them from the airport, from the Seattle airport. They are eager to understand what's happening. And we just need to continue the dialogue with them. And, it'd be nice to have some additional dialogue with Patty Murray, our other elected congressional official in Washington state, and then moving this discussion down into Oregon and California. We already have, the whales and the fish already have the ear of Simpson, Representative Simpson from Idaho. This is not a Washington issue. This is a Pacific Northwest and California issue. And so the more people that can get involved and engaged and educated and pushing this message, that's where my hope lies. That's so well said.
It's really the summer of orca and salmon, isn't it? I mean, this is the time, this is the place, and salmon people. We're all salmon people, and it's time for salmon people to speak. I want to share something I learned today, Giles. You won't believe this. So I got this email from Alexandra Morton, up there in Alert Bay. She's a longtime total warrior on salmon. Exactly, love her. Anyway, she sends me this email, says, "Hey, Lynda, I just got the coded wire tag information on the sport fishery up in BC. Guess what they're catching? Elwha River kings. The Elwha River is closed to fishing. There's a total straight up moratorium. It's been there ever since dam removal. Even on the tribe, nobody is allowed to fish in the Elwha River. And the sport fishery, they're catching them up there in BC. Wow.
Where's the regulation at, Lynda?
Holy mackerel. So that was a surprise. But I do want to ask Giles to call out one more thing, which I just think is so beautiful. I learned this when I was researching my book. You know, one of the really fun things about researching a book or a big series like we did in the paper called Hostile Waters, and maybe somebody on staff could throw up the link for Hostile Waters so people who maybe don't see it, haven't seen it, could look it up. It's still online from the Seattle Times. But one of the really fun things is you get to talk to all these smart people like Giles and learn their science. And I got to call John K.B. Ford up in Canada, who is a real pioneer of orca science. And he was one of the ones who was the first to figure out that these sounds that the whales make are not just like random squeaks. No, these are dialects, they're languages, and they're passed on generation to generation. And I will never forget, if I live to be 100, like, you know, J2 or L25, I will never forget him saying to me, you know, these are really societies. These are societies of great antiquity, when he was talking about these families. And I just thought that was so beautiful. You know, these are not random black and white wildlife just kind of twirling around out there. These are close-knit families. The young never leave their mothers, lifelong, and they're passing down culture, learning, knowledge, ceremonies, language, generation to generation. And they've been in this region, as you said, since time out of mind. And they've been alive as a species on our planet for 6 million years. You know, and I just love their eminence, and I love the fact that when people say to me, Giles, I wonder what you say when people say this. Oh, they're just like us. And I think, don't flatter yourself. You know, are you kidding me? I mean, these animals have been around for so long, and they don't war, they don't hurt one another, they share food, they can stick together as a family forever. I mean, God, my family has trouble getting through a weekend. So it's like, they're so, I mean, what goes through your mind in terms of just what it's like to be around them and to watch them? Do you ever feel mentored by them?
Oh, absolutely. You said it exactly how I feel it, is that they are a better version of us. We should be looking to them to help us understand how to be with each other. Yeah, I mean, you totally nailed it. That's how I feel. They care for their young. They forage for and with each other, and they share food even when they're starving, and they don't let their sick flounder. They stay with them, and absolutely, I think it's incredibly. I've been accused of anthropomorphizing them, and I've said that that's an insult to them. We should be, whatever the word is, whale-promorphizing ourselves. We should be looking to them as how to be on the planet. So, yeah, I'm with you on that. Yeah.
I like that. We need to whale-promorphize ourselves. Orca, we need to come up with a word for that. Here's the one that gets me. Okay, so during the capture era, which was a very dark time in our history, anybody who wanted to go catch one of these animals and separate these families, and they always went for the young because they were the cheapest to ship, could go ahead and catch them and ship them anywhere in the world to an aquarium to make money for profit. They sold them. They were totally commodified. But during that time, when the southern resident families, which were preferentially targeted for this worldwide trade in orca whales, the southern residents, it's hard for me to talk about this, but what would happen is they were culled, right? So the catchers are separating the larger whales from the small ones that they want. And the larger whales, the parents, would not leave. They were put on the other side of the net. They were free. They could swim away, and they would not leave. They would stay. And the calling that would go back and forth between the mother and the child, and it's just unbearable. And one of the incredible interviews that I did when I was working on Hostile Waters for the paper, and also when I did a much bigger chapter on captivity in the book, I went back and I found this cameraman who went to the Miami Seaquarium, where the sole surviving whale from the capture era still lives. Her stage name is Lolita. She has other names, Scaluchoctonok, which is her named by the Lemhi Nation for the bay where she was captured, Penn Cove. And, it's going to be 51 years this August that she's been in the Miami Seaquarium, in the smallest tank anywhere any orca is kept in that we know of in the world. This reporter from Dateline NBC actually was able to go down to the Miami Seaquarium. This is some years ago now. And interview them about Lolita and the whole effort to free her, which has been going on for decades. The former governor, Mike Lowry, the late Mike Lowry, tried to free her. The Lemhi Nation is still trying to free her. So this reporter goes down there, TV reporter, to do a story about her. And here's what he does. This was so interesting. He took a recording of L-Pod calls and he played them, set off the recorder. This is after her show, after she'd performed, and they're just hanging out. And he plays this L-Pod call, and he described to me what happened next. This is all in the book. She comes bombing across the tank, and he says, and she just put her ear up, and she wanted to hear it, and she wanted to hear it, and she wanted to hear it. It was as if you heard the voice of a relative you hadn't heard in many, many years.
And you have to understand, Lolita in this tank, she's 20 feet long. Her tank is 20 feet deep. She is lifeless in this tank. So when she's hearing her family's vocalizations and she's coming to life, I mean, this is huge. And this really displays their culture and how intelligent they are. And something else that you mentioned quite often in the book, and we've already talked about today, is L25 being the oldest Southern resident. Now, that's Lolita's mother. 92 years old, and she's still alive in the wild. So here's an orca, the last surviving Southern resident in captivity, and her mom is still out there in the wild. Now, we have a limited amount of time. This is going by so fast, so we should transition to hope. But when you get a copy of Lynda's book, you'll...
I want to say something. I would like to say something that gives me great hope about this whale in Miami. The Lemhi Nation is taking, she is their relative, and they have done amazing work. Number one, the totem that went to Miami and then back again, and then just really raising awareness about this animal. And something that they are doing, which I think is brilliant, is that they are using the Antiquities Act. Basically, it's cultural objects that were removed from tribes are now being, it's a law that they have to be returned to the tribe. And they are using those laws having to do with returning their cultural, I'm sorry, I don't have my words right now, but they're using that law to say she is our relative. She is part of our culture, and she needs to be returned to us. And this is a different way of approaching the Miami Seaquarium to not request but demand that this animal be returned to them. And I really feel like this has a better shot at making this happen than anything so far in the past. I don't know if you have any comments about that, Lynda.
Yeah, I mean, I do know this: the Lemhi Nation never give up. I mean, that's a fact. And they have taken her on as a cause now for years, and they will never give up, ever. And the reason for that is the way they understand the Southern residents is not that they're separate wildlife off there in the sea someplace, but as family. They call them the Kolchalmachtan, the people that live under the sea. And they have long and beautiful culturally bound stories about how that came to be, and that whole story is in the book. I interviewed the late Chief Bill James, to whom I dedicated this book, sitting by the wood stove in his house on the reservation during a spring rainstorm, listening to him tell the story of how it is that they know that the Southern residents are the people who live under the sea and their family members, relatives. And it's a beautiful story. Steve Ringman, the photographer that I'm so fortunate to work with at the Seattle Times and who took most of the pictures in this book, recorded the whole thing. So I was able to provide it verbatim in the book. And I remember when it was going through edit, the editor said to me, "Don't you think this is kind of long? Don't you think we should trim it?" I was like, no. I want every word. It's precious. It is so special that it was shared with the world, this cultural understanding. I mean, let's face it, when the Lemhi people first, or who we now call the Lemhi people, the first people of the Salish Sea from that region, first came to this place, the orcas were there to greet them. And something Jay Julius, a former chairman of the Lummi Nation, likes to say, and a lifelong fisherman, is that they know our songs. And so you can be sure that they will never give up on her. And I don't know what twist or turn will come next, but and there are other NGOs working on this and have been working on it for a very long time. So we'll see. We will see. You know, I can't believe she's still alive, honestly. I don't know how she does it.
Same.
I mean, I just find it astonishing. It's incredible. There is one other.
I think she's alive because she's meant to come out. This is meant to be a story. We need to see this. We need to stop keeping orcas in captivity, and she's going to stay alive until she's retired to a sea sanctuary.
Do we have any questions from the audience?
I bet we do. Well, I see one there. What would be the next step after Lolita is returned? Would she be able to be released? Well, the first step is recovery. She would be in a netted off cove in her home waters in the Salish Sea, and Chinook salmon would be provided for her. I mean, let's face it, she's coming out of solitary confinement, right? She's got to go through a period of adjustment. And whether she would be able to one day be released to the wild or not is not yet known. But the plan among those who are talking about this, and there are plenty of people working on it, is a time of recovery, retirement from shows, you know, not performing anymore, and a time of recovering of her mental and physical health. And at least she would be in her home waters. She would be able to hear her family. She would be reconnected with her home waters and with her family.
I love all the enthusiasm. I see people here really want to know how to protect Lolita, and I think we should all get together and really take a deep dive into what's going on with Lolita and how we can help her. Let's go back to the wild residents and, you know, hey, over the last 100 years, what have we done to them? We've shot at them, we've harpooned them, we've captured and put them in aquariums, we've taken away their fish, we've dumped chemicals into their water and polluted their ocean, we've blocked their rivers. We've done a lot, but they're still hanging on. They can endure. And so what should we do? What do you want the people in this room to do? What's the message we need to send them home with today?
Well, number one is educate yourself. Number two is speak out, you know, be politically engaged. Absolutely, that's critical. Number three, you know, understand that none of this was done maliciously. I think it's really important to put that down, because it wasn't done maliciously. It was done in the same things that are always way things are always done, incrementally over time, and it's added up, and there's too much of it. And so what do? We make less of it. We undo the damage and we stop doing more. Simple. You can overcomplicate this, honestly, but it really is that simple. Undo the damage where we can. We can't do it everywhere, but where we can and where it makes sense, we should fix the habitat that we've ruined. And furthermore, we should stop ruining it. There's a very interesting piece of legislation that's had a few starts in Washington State, hasn't yet gotten very far, but it takes a look at our so-called no net loss standard of development to say net gain. That every time you alter the landscape in the future in Washington, the new standard would be you have to actually make it better for wildlife, rather than just, you know, it's not, you know, we didn't lose anything. Well, first of all, we don't meet that standard and everybody knows it. And secondly, how about actually trying to make it better? This is a little bit like the ESA, which is about preventing extinction. Well, what about abundance? What about the abundance of this place? I mean, there's no word for famine in the Lummi language. I mean, the idea of scarcity is a new thing. And the whole question I ask in my book is, will we in our new prosperity also encounter and have to face the sadness of a new poverty? If we lose these animals, if we lose the clean, cold water that are our rivers, if we lose the orcas, you know, that's the opposite of prosperity. So it's about directing our resources and our knowledge and the capacity of these fantastic scientists like Giles. They've done beautiful peer-reviewed work, so you know we know what we need to do, and we need to build on our successes. You know, one of the things that came out of the Orca task force was to quiet the waters, and steps have been taken. I mean, for the first time ever, the commercial whale watch industry is regulated. It was not before, broadly, in terms of having to be licensed and having to, you know, follow new and more strict limits in terms of distance that they have to keep from these whales. Vulnerable whales, such as pregnant whales, brand new birth whales, they would all be, you couldn't watch those whales. These are all new. These are new standards. And can we do more? Sure. But we are taking steps. We are doing things. We just need to do more.
So speaking of steps at Wild Orca, since 2014, they've been working to engage the public and engage policymakers. We believe science should be actionable. So I don't know if you could see here in the bottom left corner, if you want to take action for killer whales, it will take you to our Orca action guide, and you can see a number of campaigns where you can join and really make some movement and help the southern residents, help the salmon. Let's get this habitat protected. It's a race against extinction, and we're working to make conservation and science accessible and digestible. And Giles is a rare breed. Lynda, we spoke about this, but she's that scientist that can actually communicate the importance of her science. And so many scientists struggle with that. And Giles, you do an exceptional job, and thank you very much for everything you're doing, everything both of you are doing. I also want to ask both of you, it's the full moon tonight, right? And
Yeah.
You're supposed to manifest with the full moon. And I think manifesting is very important. So I'd like to ask the both of you, Lynda, if you would like to answer first, who is your Oprah? So that's my choice. But if you could meet with one person and one politician, a celebrity, an athlete, someone with influence, someone that you think could make the change, who would you choose to sit down with?
L25. I want to hear her stories. I want to know what she's seen. All those miles, all that pristine ocean, all those families, all those stories. L25.
Great answer. I love that. I wasn't that creative. I would love to hear L25. Giles, how about you?
I really feel that that's such a hard question because it depends on so many things. But in a nutshell, if I had an hour to sit down with somebody, oh my goodness, it's harder than, and I even was a little bit prepared for this question. I really feel like I would try and I would talk to our elected politicians in Washington State. I can't name one. There's three, and I can't choose which one, but I would really just want to bring them with me on the boat. I would want to bring in, Governor Inslee and Maria Cantwell and Patty Murray out on the boat with me, just to have an afternoon to be able to have them see what I see and be able to have the time to talk about the whales and discuss the issues. And I think I just lost connection.
No, you're there.
Okay, my computer just said, lost connection. So that I think that's who I would want to talk to right now in
She'll be back.
She'll be back. She's swimming with the orcas.
I was just getting lost in our chat that I haven't been watching, and I'm seeing all these.
There she is. Yay.
That's what I would say.
It's a good answer. That's a really good answer. Yeah.
I really feel like the biggest thing is for people to have a connection with these whales. For some people, it doesn't take seeing them in person. There are people around the world that through your journalism, Lynda, you took this story of the southern residents and you broadcast what was happening with this population around the world. And these whales do not have a better advocate than you. And this book, continues the story. It broadens the story. It brings in more voices and more things to know about and things to learn about. I cannot thank you enough for the work that you've done on behalf of these whales and on behalf of the salmon that they rely on and the ecosystems that all of us rely on.
Well, Well,
Thank
back
you.
at you. I mean, absolutely back at you. I want to share one more thought, which actually comes from John Ambrose down at Noah's office in Central California. He's actually in Sacramento. And here's what he said to me. He said, and this is in a chapter about habitat in the book, and I thought it was so poignant. I was writing about California and the dire situation down there. And he said, the biggest issue for us actually is people down here, they don't even know that California is a salmon state. And up there in Washington, you still have people that care about salmon. You hear about salmon, people talk about salmon, they care about salmon. The number one thing that people need, job one, numero uno, first box you got to check, awareness. Know that every river has salmon in it. Know that every time you go over a highway that's crossing a river, there's a fish that's got to get through a culvert that highway is on. Understand that we share this space. That's why I titled the book Shared Waters, Shared Home. We're not alone, and thank goodness for that. And I think his point is a beautiful point. It's about awareness. And to the degree that we keep that awareness and we share that awareness and we live in that awareness, this is all going to come out just fine.
I love that. I think it's also really important that we remember, if you're here in this room, you obviously care about orcas and the ecosystem, and you have a passion. You're moved from your soul, right? And I think that that's so important, and I think that's really where you create the most change. I think it resonates with others, and it reads well, and authenticity. It's so real, and it's so important to use your voice and embrace your weird, and really, don't be fearful of what others are going to say if you want to save the whales, or there's so many social injustices going on, not just environmental. So I know it's really like, oh, but is it safe to say this right now? If it's not you, then who is it going to be, right? It needs to be one of us, the people that actually care.
I want to call out the shoulders on which we stand. We're not the first, hardly. And it's very important to recognize the Washington state leaders who ended the capture era. This was the former Slade Gorton, the late Slade Gorton, U.S. Senator. He was Attorney General at the time, working with Ralph Monroe. He was at that time staff to Governor Dan Evans, went on to be U.S. Senator. All three of them Republicans, by the way. They were the ones who shut down forever the capture era in Washington state. Of course, the tribal leaders, going back generations, have always stood for the salmon and for the orcas. And I think that the scientists, such as John K.B. Ford, who I mentioned, and others who came before Giles, there are generations of people who have worked on this cause, and I want to celebrate their work tonight. And I want to make a pledge on behalf of everyone listening tonight that work will continue. I mean, that's the job. What else are we here for? So sign up, show up, do it every day. It's a beautiful world, and we're lucky to be part of it, and it's our job to take care of it, just as our forebears did before us. And I live in the city of Seattle. Puget Sound is cleaner today. There are more whales, big great whales. I mean, we're talking about humpbacks. We're talking about gray whales. We're talking about harbor porpoise, and all kinds of marine mammals are back today in Puget Sound that weren't there a generation ago. And the water is cleaner, and it's cleaner because we've spent billions of dollars on cleaning up the water with better sewage treatment. This is essential work, and it's effective work. And it's important for us to understand that these societal policies, whether the Marine Mammal Protection Act or the Clean Water Act, and the things that we pay our taxes for, such as decent stormwater treatment that actually cleans the water, and better wastewater treatment, these things work. And so have faith in these policies. Lean on your government to do more of what you believe matters. Just keep doing it. It actually works. And we know it. And we know it because of scientists like Giles, and we know it from our own experience. You go out on Puget Sound today from a place like Everett, as I did recently, with a team of students and a couple of scientists, and we went out there to go watch the gray whales snuffling in the clean sands of the Snohomish River Delta after ghost shrimp, from this nutritious plume coming down from the Snohomish River. And I saw marbled murrelets bobbing on the waves that are going to, fly 50 miles back to the old growth up in the forest with a little fish in their gut. It's a resilient system. Nature can come back, and it happens every time, everywhere we give it a chance.
Giles, any closing remarks? You're on mute.
Yeah, I think that word that you just ended with, resilience, that's exactly the word that I keep in my heart, is that the nature is resilient. And we just need to unbuild things that we've built and put in place that shouldn't be there anymore. And do habitat restoration when we need to, do habitat protection whenever possible. Preserve that land that's not already degraded, recover the land that is, and unbuild it. And they will come, they will return.
So everyone, we're going to close. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for giving us your time and sharing the space and listening. Remember, if you want to act, you have homework actually, not if you want to, of course you want to. So go to wildorca.org/act. Donate to wildorca.org should you choose. We would love that. And pick up a copy of Lynda's book. It's incredible. I had early access. I loved it. I actually want the physical copy too because I'm a book person. Thank you so much, Lynda. Thank you for your time today. We really want to thank Patagonia, not just for sponsoring this event, but for working on behalf of the planet. They're in business to protect our planet, and that's what we are all about here today. And we are very thankful to Patagonia, thankful to all of you listeners.
Thank you, guys.